folks? Dude here, and, just give me 1 second here. I think we need a Tigger moment. It's older, it's homebrew, it's later in the day, but I needed that. Alright, so looking today at one of my favorite places on the internet, a firearms blog known as, the Firearms Blog, and I found something really exceedingly completely badass. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Smith & Wesson's version of a .410 revolver known as the Governor. Okay, Taurus has the Judge, Smith & Wesson has the Governor. They're being catty. But essentially, let me kick this thing up in size so you guys can see what I'm talking about. It is a .410 revolver that takes 45 long Colt, but here's the completely badass part. It also accepts, takes, and shoots with 45 ACP. Oh, badass. Here's the other cool thing. There's one more round up the pipe. They probably used an end frame. It's SCANDIUM. Probably have the stainless steel insert like in their other SCANDIUM weapons. Smith & Wesson knows 45 ACP like nobody's business. They made 45 ACP revolvers for damn near forever. The big guy would be, what? The stainless steel would be a 625. The SCANDIUM would be a 325. It is 6 shots. The Taurus is only 5 shots. It is 6 shots, so it can accept full moons, partial moon clips, and it is badass. Let me bump this up just one more size so you guys can see what I am talking about. Okay, now here's the other really kind of, well, here's something that kind of sucks a little bit, but it's a short extractor. Or ejector, whatever you wish to call it. It's a short ejector. And basically, it might be a little problematic for the 45 long Colts if they tend to bulge a little bit, but it's a pretty low pressure cartridge. 45 ACP, 45 long Colt, .410. They're all basically very lightly loaded cartridges. They don't really have a huge amount of kick. They don't have a whole hell of a lot of power behind them. They work because they're throwing so much bullets. Now, here's the other thing that's kind of cool about having a weapon built like this. Basically, let me do a pointer here. Let me grab a pointer. Okay, hemostats. Hemostats will be my pointer. Okay, basically you have, basically a cartridge probably winding up about that length. Okay, so you've got half the cylinder, which is now not being utilized except for guiding the bullet until it hits the forcing cone, finds its way through the barrel, and reaches its exit. Okay, now here's the cool part. You shoot a 45 ACP, and it basically immediately hits the barrel. It has friction, has drag. It doesn't get as much acceleration as what it could utilize. This distance between the very front of the cartridge to the very, very first point of contact is known as free bore. Now, the 45 ACP and 45 long Colt 410 cartridge are loaded to black powder pressures. They always have been loaded to black powder pressures because that's when they originated, was basically for black powder. You can hot load a 45 ACP, but I would never do it in unmodified on 1911, simply because if you do that, it'll come apart in your face. It is not made to do that. The 45 ACP in a standard 1911 needs to be modified to shoot at 451 Detonics and needs to shoot 460 Roland at much different specs. The 45 ACP cartridge is not built to hold that kind of pressure. It basically tops out about 18 to 19,000 copper units of pressure, or basically black powder. I've seen a video where the guy shot a 45 ACP Mac 10 with black powder. Worked great. Looked really weird seeing this big blooming cloud coming out all around the gun, but it worked. Now, here's the thing that's kind of really exceedingly cool. One more shot. Here's the other thing that's kind of really, really cool. It's a Smith & Wesson. Okay, I know there's fans out there for Taurus, but I've got enough contacts in the gun industry, and I've talked to enough people, and I've heard enough horror stories. I'm not going to go with Taurus. I mean, even though they did make the Judge, they've made the Judge forever, and yeah, it's around, it's been around, it's going to continue to be sold like crazy because people snap them up for social occasions. I'm going to go with the Smith. Very simply put, because I know the Smith & Wessons are better, and even with the stupid-ass safety lock, it's a light enough kicking cartridge that the safety lock should not be an issue. In terms of general appearance, you know it's a Smith. I mean, the barrel profile, the cylinder latch. Let me get a better picture here. Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so basically the variations on... Let me jump it down one level so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. Okay, the variations on the cylinder latch, that's obviously Smith & Wesson. The front barrel profile, the scallops, the cutouts, it's obviously Smitty. I mean, you know that from a fact. The grips are available with either laser or non-laser grips. You can fit Smith & Wessons with anybody's grip. They've been around long enough that pretty much everybody makes grips for a Smith & Wesson. Okay, now the one-shot extra is cool, but here's what you can do. Smith & Wessons have from time eternal turned clockwise. What you can do is you can load the first 2 cylinders with 410 shot shell, like, well, snake shot. Excuse me. So basically, Mr. Snake comes out, bap, snakes down for the occasion. You've got 4 more shots of drop the dead guy on his ass, deader. Social occasion, ready for action, good to go, bad guy stopper. So, basically, if you have a social occasion and dude gets 2 facefuls of 410, it's not going to be good for him. I mean, basically, it's about the same thing as throwing cinders in his face, and if he's wearing glasses, they might shatter. If they hit his eyes, he might, well, basically, he'll pop his eyes. His eyes will burst like fresh grapes, because you're basically running, fairly high-velocity pieces of lead through there. And if nothing else, he'll develop an affliction known as lead freckles. Not good. Now, here's the other thing that's really, truly cool about this. It's basically using cartridges that have been around forever. The 45 Long Colt has been dropping cowboys since, 140 years plus. The 45 ACP since its time in origination back in World War I has been exceedingly effective. And here's a really, truly scary thing about the 45 ACP. It works by mass and momentum. It does not work by speed. It roughly is about the same thing as like a 357, simply because it is throwing such a small, squat, nasty little bullet. And I don't mean little, I mean big. You throw a 45 ACP at somebody, potentially you hit him at the waist, it pops out his shoulder. Not unusual. They are just that big, that much momentum, and they tend to do that in a hydrostatic medium known as the human body. Do they really do that in terms of cars? No, it's not made to do that. That's why they made the 357. The 357 came about because, the rum runners started using big, heavy-ass cars with extra sheet metal on board. You could load that thing up with a Tommy gun, and it just kept on rolling. Take a look sometime at, Depression-era cars. They're tanks. It is not too unusual to see a car body, not quite nickel thickness, but probably close to penny thickness. They are tanks. You can shoot those things with a Tommy gun all day long, and the bullets will not exit the door. But I'm now kind of going roundabout. But here's the cool part. Even with that short-ass extractor, ejector, whatever you wish to call it, I usually just say ejector, even if one of the cartridges hangs up, there's 5 other guys to say, dude, we're going out. We're going out now, and you're coming with us. Now, the only downside is basically, the 410's a fairly big rim. 45 ACP is basically a non-rim cartridge. Long Colt's a semi-rim. They're all going to work. Now, here's the thing that's kind of cool. Being old enough, I remember reading about these things. I think I've actually seen 1 or 2, but the younger guys probably have never heard of them. There was a 357 revolver called a Medusa. Now, if you looked at this thing, it basically looked like something out of Blade Runner. I mean, it's this really bizarre-looking revolver, but it had a couple cool talent aspects. 1, it was a 357 revolver that would shoot any 355, 357 projectile loaded cartridge from 38 S&W all the way up to 9mm Magnum. Now, here's the thing that's kind of cool. As everybody looks at it and goes, oh, gee, that's a non-rim cartridge. Yeah, you're right. It is a non-rim cartridge. But inside the gun, inside the cylinder, would be the plate. It grabs a hold of the cartridge rim, kicks out the cartridge. Okay, if it passes by the cartridge and gets no grab, there's a little steel spring that popped out, would grab the extractor groove, and would push the cartridge out of the gun. Cool stuff. Very low production, very hard to find. Were never, ever that affordable. I remember the damn things were probably somewhere at about $1,200 to $1,300 if you could find them. If you could find them. I'd seen a few, and they were towing $1,000 when they were available, and then they got rare, then they got a collectible, and then they got, unobtainium. So that one is gone by the ethers. But this gun is available. Now, here's the other cool part. Scrolling through the article, and this thing just came out. The MSRP, which would be the manufacturer's suggested retail price, is $679. That's right, that is not a typo. $679 for the non-laser model. Alright, well, let's put this in perspective. A Taurus Judge is what, 400, 500, 600 bones, somewhere in there? This gives you 1 more shot. It's a Smith & Wesson, and it shoots 1 more cartridge. That's badass. Now, in terms of all these things in respect to one another, that's going to be a deal for me, man. I'm definitely going to buy one of those when they come out if I get the cash in hand. But I am definitely going to buy one of those because, well, I know 357 revolvers. I know Smith & Wesson revolvers. I know 22 Smith & Wesson revolvers. I've got 3 Smith & Wessons. They are excellent. They don't break. They always work, and I'll stick my ass on them because I know they're going to work. Now, I know there's a bunch of Taurus fans, and Tauruses do work, but I've heard problems down the pike. They don't last. In terms of Scandium, I've heard problems with Scandium. But here's the thing. A 44 Magnum Scandium Snubby, you're asking for trouble. The recoil is going to be ridiculous. A 41 Magnum Scandium revolver. The revolver weighs 19 ounces. How much can't it kick? So what happens is the safety lock mounts up, it ties the gun up, and usually what happens, hopefully, is this happens to you at the range. You return the gun to Smith & Wesson, they fix it, you get it back. Most people just grind that little nub off the inside of the safety lock so it doesn't engage the hammer anymore and block it up. But here's the downside. In a high-pressure, high-intensity cartridge, right there, right underneath that little channel, underneath the extractor, the ejector rod, and right underneath, let me bump this up a little bit so you guys can see what I'm talking about. This is technical. This is fairly technical. Let me bump this up, and let me find a big picture. Okay, this shelf here, that basically is a cutout for the ejector rod and between the junction of the barrel shroud where it screws into it, because these are not a one-piece barrel, it's stainless steel liner, screws into the frame. And actually, I think what happens is this shroud is probably just glued onto the shroud, onto the sleeve, and then the sleeve screws in. But underneath this very thin place here, it cracks. Now, I know for a fact my Smith & Wesson Model 19 is not designed for a steady diet of 357 Magnum. It just isn't. Just give me 1 second here. Like some of the lower intensity steels back in the day when that thing was built, it was basically made for the thing to be carried a lot more than shot, but when it was shot, it was intended to be shot with the real deal. It was intended to be practiced with 38 Special, use the 357 for familiarity and for real deal. What do I carry it with around the house? Usually plus P 38 Special, because if I pop somebody and I miss, I want it to hang up in something. Now, in terms of what this thing does, because it's going to be a fairly low-pressure cartridge. You know, basically 45 ACP, 45 long Colt, 410. These are all low-pressure cartridges. The weapon is not going to be stressed. Hence, this probably should not ever crack in your lifetime. Scandium is strong, but it is basically an aluminum alloy. And anything that is alloy, well, if you put it under enough stress, it will fail before steel. I mean, it's the nature of the business. It's the price you gotta pay. And, it's a bad looking little mug, man. I like these things a lot. The fact that basically it's Scandium, even probably with a stainless steel, cylinder, I'd very seriously doubt this thing's gonna weigh much more than about 26 ounces, 28 ounces at its best. Which basically puts it roughly about the same range as, probably my Model 19. So pretty much you got the weight of a snubby revolver with some serious gumption. If nothing else, with the 410s, you got some serious snake ability. With the 45 long Colts and the 45 ACP, you got some serious anti-personnel. So between those two aspects, you've got a one-shot carrying apparatus to expend your munitions. I would say that this is probably going to be one of the best things that Smith & Wesson's come out with in probably the last 10 years, because they basically took the ball and they ran with it. They really, truly did. They said, okay, Taurus makes a 5-shot, we'll make a 6-shot. They make one in 45 long Colt, 410. How much different would it be to cut the back of the cylinder just a little bit more to make it accept the 45 ACP with a moon clip? Ain't much more work. They've been making the 45 long Colts and the 45 ACP revolvers forever. They basically cut a little bit more cylinder, they make a little bit more cylinder to make the frame a little bit longer. Ba-bam. Governor. Also notice they call this thing the Governor right off the bat. It's not like a Model 60, it's not like a Model 35, it's not like a Model 34, it's not a 617, it's not a 38, Target Elite with a model number, 686, 586. The 6 and the 5 just means stainless or carbon. But they're calling this thing a name right out of the box. That's a change up, and Smith & Wesson is really coming up with a new paradigm, and I'm digging on it. Good times in here on the podcast channel. I'll see you, and as always,